Hello and welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I am so excited to be here with Susan Meier back again. She was one of the very first guests on this show way back, I think, in 2017. Susan, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Will. Thanks for having me.
Susan, I always enjoy our conversations, and so you are a kind of a marketing and branding consultant. I'll ask you to explain that better than I just did. But I want to talk about this new side project that you've been working on. So maybe first just give us the 1 minute overview on your regular day-to-day practice, the kind of work that you normally do, and then we can get into workspace studio. So what's Susan Meier's, how would you describe your day-to-day business?
Yeah, so Susan Meier Studio is the name of my consulting business. And for that, I'm a brand strategist by training. I'm a strategist. Started out with Boston Consulting Group. And what I do as a branding professional is I really coach companies, large corporations, small startups, on how to define and express their brand. I do most of my work in healthcare, but the deliverables tend to be, a strategy for moving forward, a set of messaging that's going to be rolled out in their marketing materials or website copy, and then design, so the visuals that bring it to life.
Great. So I love when people do side projects. I don't know, it just makes my heart sing. I just love the idea of side projects. And yours is just particularly, it's just absolutely beautiful, this website. It's workspace-studio.com. Tell us the story behind this website and what you're doing with it.
Thank you. Yeah, I am kind of a serial side hustler. I've been side hustling before that was a word. And I love it too. It makes my heart sing. And I think this is a project I'm really excited about, that was born organically out of two friends talking about, oh my gosh, how are we going to work from home in this pandemic in a house full of people, in a small space, and rolled out into, well, why don't we ask people what they're doing and, see, oh, I know this person, that person definitely has a cool setup. Let's talk to them. And so my friend is a photographer. She's a very accomplished, internationally recognized photographer. And she thought, okay, I can either photograph people's spaces or I can art direct them to photograph their own spaces. And maybe we could put something together that we can share with people. And I started interviewing, doing a proper 1 hour, tapping into my consumer research skills, 1 hour Zoom interviews with, by the way, all these super interesting people who span the gamut from corporate lawyers to fine artists and everything in between, and talking to them about, the nuts and bolts of what their space, their home workspace looks like. And then asking them, how do you create, what's your creative process and how do you nurture creativity in your space? How do you get into that productive mode that you need to be in sometimes? What's your ideal space look like? What are the important elements of your space? And really trying to get a rounded picture of what makes for a best practice workspace. And, I think one of my goals that's close to my heart for this project is being able to share this with people who aren't necessarily, artists or designers, who would like to really elevate their home workspace, which, by the way, I think is here to stay even as the pandemic begins to pass and people begin to leave their homes. I think that we are looking at a hybrid model of work going forward, for quite some time, if not forever.
Okay. So, listeners, I'm just saying you got to go to this website. I'm going to include a link in the show notes, workspace-studio.com. And Susan, this is something that I would not have been surprised at all to see this kind of level of art direction and writing. I mean, it's an architectural digest or one of the top glossy magazines. You and Hallie Burton have done such a beautiful job. It's like these great Q&A write-ups of the interviews, nicely edited down, and then these incredible, well lit, like beautiful photos of these spaces. It just makes you want to get to work, right? I love it. Tell me about some of the and the kind of key messages or key learnings or maybe surprising insights that you've gotten so far from this project.
Well, thank you for your kind words. And I think if we were to put one intention out there into the universe for this project, it would probably be to be featured in Architectural Digest. So maybe they're out there listening somewhere. So I think there's, the consultant in me cannot help but think in terms of key themes as I'm doing this type of project, and indeed key themes emerge. I think that I'm compiling a list of small changes you can make tomorrow to your workspace that at some point I'll put out there into the world. But I think there's a few that really jump to the top of the list, which is really interesting across discipline. If there's Pilates instructor, finance guru, fiber artist, like across the board, there are a couple things that really resonate for everyone. So one I would say is, to quote Virginia Woolf, a room of one's own. So there's this necessity that we have, I think, as human beings when we need to focus, and this is both for creative energy and also for that, when you really need to drop in and focus on something detailed, or when you need to like open up and dream, to create a boundary around your space. And this can be a physical boundary. And I think a lot of people really talked about being able to close the door as being super important. Also being able to leave your stuff where it was. And I think this is something that a lot of us are struggling with who are working at the kitchen table or the dining table or sharing a space with other people. That ability to sort of put your thoughts physically out onto a table or a space and have them be there when you come back or rearrange them, kind of making the mental visual. And there's also the kind of metaphorical piece of a room of one's own, which is having boundaries around your time, which again is a challenge for people. But creating a space, physical and mental and emotional, where you can reside kind of permanently and specifically in those times when you need to be productive. That's number one. Stop me. I'll just keep talking. But
keep talking.
If you have
keep
questions,
talking. No,
go
keep going. Keep going.
So I think another one, which is, this is kind of interesting. There's like two sides of the coin. So on one side, there's the kind of keep it simple, eternal maxim, right? Like keep it simple, keep your desk neat and sweet, not having piles of stuff and chaos, visually around you helps you. Gretchen Rubin has a great book, Outer Order, Inner Calm, right, about reducing clutter, physically in your space and, then therefore creating mental space. And a lot of people talked about that need to kind of keep things orderly, even as their day might create masses of chaos. Like if you're a prop stylist, right, your whole job is to like have tons of stuff around. But even, and maybe even especially those folks who are using a lot of physical stuff in their work felt the need to kind of bring it back. Everything goes back in its place and everything goes away from visual sight so that you can start neat again in the morning. So that is one side of the coin. On the other side of the coin, there's this kind of balance with, however, I don't want a completely sterile and barren space, right? I think of it as tokens, mementos, tokens, talismans, artifacts. People used all those different words to describe it. But this idea of kind of shrines almost around your space that mark things that are important to you, that spark joy, that bring you to a different time and place. So people had, picture that their mother gave them, or some artwork that their son made, or a special object that one of their vendors had handcrafted for them, and or seashells they had collected. These things in moderation because the space needed to still be clean, but having these little moments that you could kind of hang on to, rest on between thoughts, transport you to, your happy place, right? Were also very, very important in the space. And then the third kind of big category, I think I would call it all of this in the category of nature. But there are two things inside of that. One is plants, like plant life, and the other is light, like natural light. So, yeah, two like real simple, but super powerful hacks. I would say find a window and get a plant, right? Because people, and it didn't matter whether you were out in the countryside or in New York City, having some natural light flowing in just completely transformed people's experience. And sometimes it was as simple as like, I actually turned my desk to face the window and then everything was better. Or, before when I wasn't here a lot, I didn't have very many plants. So, I was traveling all the time. And now that I'm here all the time, I notice almost like passively, like it wasn't an intention, but I look around and I filled the whole space with plants. And, and talking about how, of course there's scientific benefits of that. They clean the air and whatnot, but the ability to help people focus, help people feel more creative, help people feel more alive because it's a living thing in your space, was really profound.
I totally agree with that. I just moved into a new office myself, and I finally have a nice bit of some window light, and put in my window some microgreens. So they just
Nice.
germinated a couple of days ago, and I'll start snipping away at them. But it does just sort of add this nice green kind of living kind of vibe to the room.
Yeah.
I love the way you've captured your the folks that you profile, and some of the quotes are just amazing and great. Like you interviewed your partner on this, Hallie, and in what way would you say that your workspace is a portrait of you? And she responded, "It's clean, it has dimension, and the curves are the best thing about it."
That was a good answer to that question, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean, I think that was also a really core piece of the idea when we were cooking this idea up, is the notion that that your space is a portrait of you, or or should be ideally a portrait of you. And I think that's grounded in my branding background, right? Like when you think about, you walk into the Apple store, that space is a portrait of the brand. And likewise, I know I'm most comfortable if I can work anywhere. And I can tell you about some of the crazy places I've worked. Well, because this is also a lifelong, not really a side hustle, but just sort of a lifelong hobby of creating workspaces in odd places. But when I know that it's ready for me to work in, when it feels like a portrait of me. And I don't know that I used that word in the past, but it has to feel somehow like it expresses who I am, or at least some dimensions of who I am. And then I can kind of relax. And conversely, I think that's one of the reasons that co-working spaces haven't worked well for me over the years, although I've tried many of them, like the kind where you kind of come and plug in and just sit at a different place each time, because I don't feel grounded there. It doesn't feel like me.
I've been wondering if there's going to be kind of a new sort of, I don't want to say exactly co-working space, but a new kind of business of offering offices to people that are now allowed and able to work remote. So they don't want to commute all the way into the city, or they want to commute, but they would like a third place outside their house, outside the living space, where they can really craft a workspace that
Yeah.
is separate, and to your point, a room of their own, where it can be designed for that. It just feels to me like that's a kind of a business that will arise, and more so than
I
we've seen in the
hope
past.
so.
Yeah.
I hope so, because that's certainly what I would like to have. And I think that's been my lifetime search for the right kind of situation. And I think the closest I've come to that is like an artist studio. But as you know, those are few and far between, affordable ones are few and far between. And the ones that are affordable don't have a window. And, here in New York anyway. And I think there's a real business model for a small room of one's own with a window.
Did you notice a theme so far of people having maybe more than one desk, like one desk for with personally, I have two desks and I have like one desk with a computer and then one desk
Yeah.
that does not have a computer where it's just for writing by hand and sort of doing my thinking at.
Will, I'm so fascinated that you do that as well. So, yes, that was a theme. It was more of a theme for sort of so-called creative people, because, and I know that this is a really big one for me. I can't kind of energetically, I can't be making art, for example, in the same space where I'm doing my bookkeeping. It just, I mean, not that it hasn't happened, of course, over the years, but it kind of messes with me. I really need to have a separate space, as you said, for, here's where I'm going to go and do my, screen work. I can do my writing there, which is creative, of course. But it's a different mode from like really free thought, open your mind and be creative. And yes, we saw that across a lot of people where they said, my studio, or this is my studio space where I'm making things, or I'm looking at fabric swatches, or I'm sketching. And then I move over to this part of the space, or I move out of my workspace and I go to my couch and like literally put on the TV to distract myself from the fact that I actually have to balance my books. And I do all that kind of other type of brain work.
Yeah, one thing I'm so much looking forward to as the pandemic winds down, and I hope, is being able to do some more traveling, because I often find that some of my best work will get done on the train, in a hotel somewhere, just having that different change of pace. I mean, it's great having a fixed place that's your own and you can leave your stuff, but there's also something that just jars your thinking a little bit, or adds creativity, being just in a temporary, being in a cafe in another city, or on the Amtrak up to Boston, or in a hotel in Frankfurt. Just that it kind of spurs different trains of thought somehow.
Absolutely. I find that as well. And there's actually a body of research about that. I'm sure you're familiar with Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who, wrote many books about creativity and kind of the founder of the concept of flow. And there's one of the books he wrote, he interviewed a bunch of creative people to learn about their habits and practices. And a number of them actually had this habit of leaving town for parts unknown, and just with not even like the destination being important, but just the change. I'm going to go write now. So I'm going to work on my novel and I need to just be in a different space. So I'm going to go to some hotel in some other place and be there for a few weeks. And maybe I'll go to another one for a few weeks. And that's the creative process. And I thought that was really fascinating. But yeah, I have the same experience. You're like, I'm going to do nothing this week and be on vacation. It turns out like all your best thoughts actually happen then.
Yeah, for years I've had this idea. I haven't actually implemented it, I gotta admit, but of taking the Amtrak, just round trip to Boston from New York, just spend like 9 or 10 hours on the train someday, because I find I'm so productive with the crummy internet that you get on Amtrak, but being disconnected, but that sense of motion, looking out the window, and having the flat space to work. So I love where you're going with this workspace studio. We will include a link in the show notes. Where do you see this project going next?
That's a great question. Anybody who has ideas for our business model is welcome to reach out and let me know. At the moment, it's just a passion project, and we are very passionate about collecting these stories and sharing them with people. And I'm not sure exactly where that's going to lead, but I'm really excited to see where it does.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like one of these sorts of TV shows where they would, go in and talk to people and, show their space and so forth. I mean, it very much feels like it could be one of those things. If people are like, proud of their space and think they doing something different, should they reach out to you with some offers? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All
Love
right.
it.
Fantastic. Well, Susan, we'll include a link in the show notes and as well as your way to reach out to you. And thank you so much for being on the show. It was great. We'll also obviously include a link to your regular website for your Susan Meier studio. It was so nice having you back. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you so much, Will. I really enjoyed it.